Hello everyone and welcome back to the garden. This is going to be a garden tour of our ranunculus. It's not really a tour, I guess. You've already posted the tour with all the various different types of ranunculus that we grew this season, and man, there were a lot of them. So if you haven't seen the ranunculus tour yet, I definitely encourage you to check that out. We grew a lot of different varieties that we were trialing this year, and I think I found a lot of my new favorite flowers. I'll go ahead and I'll put a link to that video here in the cards of this one so that you can check it out if you'd like. I see a lot of videos, people talking about how to grow ranunculus and everything, but it seems like it's very seldom, kind of like anemones, it's very seldom that you actually see them, growing, and you see people pre-sprouting them and whatnot, and this is how you do it, and great. But where are the results? So fortunately in this video, before we get right into it, I wanted to show you all of the ranunculus footage from our hoop house this year. We grow ranunculus, if you're new to the channel, as a cut flower. My garden is a backyard garden, and it's a donation garden where we donate flowers to like hospices and hospitals and things like that. Anybody who really needs just a little bit of extra sunshine maybe, so that's why we grow so many ranunculus, and it's hands down one of my favorite flowers. So getting right on into this, when you begin growing ranunculus, you are going to start with corms. These are corms. They look like little octopus things. They go octopus legs down in the tray. Ideally, you want to get the biggest corms possible. When you first get them, they're going to be kind of dried up looking, and like it won't look like there's much going on. Most people suggest that you soak the corms for several hours. Many will even say that you need like a fish tank bubbler or some way to aerate the water. I don't do this. I usually soak my corms for about 4 hours tops. I don't put any bubbler or anything fancy into it, and I've never really had any kind of problem with this. In fact, last season, that you're seeing all these flowers from, I didn't soak them at all. I just planted them up in a tray. So I think a lot of times in gardening, people want to make things a lot more complicated than they need to be, and in some cases, of course, you have to do that. But in this case, as long as the temperatures are right, which we'll get to in a second, it really doesn't matter. I should also mention at this time, you need to determine whether or not you need to plant these in spring or in fall. Ranunculus are hardy to USDA Zone 8, I believe. I am here in Kentucky. I'm in Zone 6B7. So I'm right on that border. So what I like to do is I am going to plant these in the fall and put them into an unheated hoop house. To get these going, I usually start these at the beginning of October, about 1 month before my first frost date in the fall. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some potting mix. I am going to put the potting mix in a tray. I'm going to take those corms. You see, if you soak the corms, they plump up quite a bit. Want to be careful not to over soak them if you do soak them, because they can start to rot, and those little kind of octopus arm banana looking things, they can start to fall off if you soak them too long. So basically I have this potting tray of moist potting mix, and I'm just going to arrange the corms in the tray with that little crown pointing up. After I have arranged them in the tray, spacing them out a little bit, I'm just going to go back and cover them with more potting soil, and I am going to leave them outside. The main reason that I can leave these corms outside in this tray is that about a month before my first frost date, the weather in my garden is absolutely ideal for these corms to start sprouting. Ideally, you want temperatures of about 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and about 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit at night. I find that when these temperatures are consistent like that, I can usually get every single corm to sprout. In fact, last season I had every single corm sprout with the exception of some of the ones that I tried to save from the prior year. If you have a winter that is much colder than mine or don't have a hoop house, you might have to start these in the spring. But the important point to remember is that you have to get a start as soon as possible. These plants really love cool temperatures, and in fact, whenever the weather starts to get consistently above 80 degrees in my garden, these stop flowering and are done flowering for the year. So if you are starting them from spring, I definitely recommend getting an early start and planting them out into the garden as transplants as soon as the soil can be worked. These are incredibly robust plants, as you will see here in a second when we get start talking about their hardiness. Here they are in the tray after about probably 2 to 3 weeks, I would guess. You can see that growth is nice and big and tall and green and lush. Really, really what we want to see. Next, I am going to transplant them into the hoop house. This black barrier you see is just weed barrier fabric. It's a landscape fabric to help me keep the weeds down. As these grow from October to November here in the fall in my growing zone, they will put on quite a bit of leafy growth. I should also mention that these are very easy to transplant. They seem very hardy. They don't seem to be disturbed by a transplant at all. My spacing is generally pretty close. I usually space them about 3 to 4 inches apart and really jam them in there so that I can get as many plants as possible. Once the colder weather starts to arrive, I do cover up my hoop house, and I will have a layer of Agribon row cover there just in case it is needed. In general, I like to keep the hoop house closed anytime it dips below about 28 degrees Fahrenheit. On occasion, if it gets very, very cold, you may see some cold damage or yellowing. Here in my garden, that usually has to do with too much moisture. I like to keep things on the drier side because my yard is just so wet. When the daylight gets about 12 hours, usually I notice we begin to see our very first ranunculus buds start to form. So here in my garden, that's in about the middle of March, if I had to guess. But even though that's in the middle of March, we still won't see those first blooms begin to open until usually about the first week of April. And then once they do, we have just an absolute profusion of color for a solid month to a month and a half. These things just bloom like crazy. Each corm will easily produce at least 10 flowers if I'm being conservative with my guess there. Of course, the initial flowers will be a little bit bigger, and you might have more blooms to harvest depending upon your technique that you use to pick those flowers. It's all your own choice there. In terms of fertilizing, I actually do not fertilize my ranunculus. At the beginning of the planting season back in fall, I just make sure that that bed has been really, really well amended with a nice finished compost, and make sure that's a good, healthy soil that's nice and loose, and that seems to do the job for me. Most of that has to do with the fact that I treat these as annuals. Mainly because I have to save space in my little backyard. But if you live somewhere where this flower will come back, it is very likely that it will come back at least, as a short-lived perennial. I'm sorry that I don't have much experience on, how long these can come back in your garden. But overall, even though I'm making the investment every single year here in my space, it doesn't mean that, you can't experiment with that. If you have any experience, I would absolutely love to hear about it. Even here in my yard, I've had a few corms overwinter and return on their own as kind of surprise volunteers, even here in my growing zone, which is really nice. Overall, just an incredible addition to the cut flower garden. I really wanted to try to make sure that I mentioned all the different growing points of this flower, but I always feel like I'm forgetting something. So if you have a question, be sure to just go ahead and put it down in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. I'm always trying to answer questions and everything like that. So if you do have a question, just post it down there and I'll try my best to answer it. Sometimes I feel like I'm not an expert, that's for sure. And that's about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I am so appreciative. I really am. As always, be sure to leave a comment down below. I love to know what you guys think. Was it helpful? What experiences do you have? I'm always learning from the comments, which I really, really love. As always, if you're not a subscriber and you like this video, be sure to hit the little subscribe button, hit the little bell. The bell tells you whenever we make new videos. It's a great way to keep up with the channel and grow just our little gardening community here. As always, all the links to everything is down in the description below. Our link to Patreon and our YouTube memberships is there. It helps support the channel. It helps me pay for things like blog fees, and occasionally I get help with editing, which is really, really helpful because let's face it, I am not the most tech savvy person on the planet. But I am trying to keep learning and keep making our videos better. There's also a link to the blog. Oftentimes you can check out the blog and there will be more information and more pictures about the thing that I've talked about in the video, just because sometimes it helps for me to write down that information and kind of organize it much better. As always, feel free to share this video with a friend. It helps us so much when we grow the channel. I hope that you are having such an incredible day, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye, guys.